So Brandon, thanks so much for taking the time to be here. Before we get the ball really rolling, if you could just share a little bit about yourself, what you do, and yeah, a little bit of your background.
My name's Brandon. My wife Lindsay and I pastor a great church together called Oasis City Church in Duncan on Vancouver Island.
Nice.
About an hour north of Victoria.
Cool.
And it's a community that has a catchment of about 90,000 people. When we say catchment, it's like a half an hour drive.
Oh, okay.
Kind of in any direction. We've been pastoring that church as the lead pastors since November 2017. And so it's been a while now. Mm-hmm. We've been through some interesting things, of course.
I bet.
Everybody has in those last 5 or 6 years. So, yeah.
That's sweet. So, I imagine you guys have busy schedules and you took your time to fly. I'm assuming you flew here?
Yeah, absolutely.
To fly here for a few days, middle of the week. Why was, the pastor's gathering important to you?
Well, for one, it's relationship based. So Lindsay and I have been friends with Pastor Brett and Pastor Desiree for a lot of years.
Cool, sweet.
And so we actually were part of the original group that gathered.
No way.
In a small gathering that just needed to relate on how to do church through, the pandemic and all the changing realities. Everything was shifting. It had moved, like everything we used to be confident in, or the systems or structures or flow, changed. And again, on top of that was this new level of isolation. And so we came out originally, I think in 2021, for a gathering. It was great. And we've created friendships and built friendships. And, that's the economy of a friendship is time. And so it's like we need to get time together. And so this was on our calendar. And as it grows, we're excited to see it happening. And
that's sweet.
We like to see when our friends meet our friends.
Yeah,
so,
totally. Yeah, that's awesome. So as a leader, obviously, you've been through a lot of changes and just things in general. What would you say has been some of the more challenging stuff you've had to deal with as a leader?
I think that for me personally, might not be what everybody's like the challenges people would think of.
Sure.
For me, I'm a builder by nature. I'm a visionary leader. So for me, one of the biggest challenges for me in leadership has been the pace, meaning how slow everything goes. It's never fast enough for me, and it's never yielding, and like it's never as full as it could be.
Right.
It's never growing big enough. It's never growing. And it's not about size. I should be careful with that metric because people think about, counting butts and seats.
Oh, sure. Okay. Yeah.
But for me, it's like, is this thing becoming strong? And why is it taking so long? So for me, patience with the process. Kind of an interesting thing. I actually worked as my father's executive for probably almost 10 years.
Oh, wow.
Kind of in a small church, but he was a great pastor, great leader. And he actually turned the church to us. Asked us to take on that role. He's still on our staff as a senior associate. He sat down and said, he's my pastor now. And
that's cool.
And just shifted roles so smoothly. Not every succession is easy.
Yeah.
But he was a different type of pastor than I was, than I am. But he knew that, what we were taking on was going to be the next step for the church. And so for me, there's the other challenge of being a long time in one place. There's things that we have to rediscover. There's things we have to re-envision. So those are some of the challenging things for me.
Yeah. Would you say, when you guys were going through that transition and you were taking over, I'm glad it was smooth for you guys, but I think that there's a lot of pastors that are currently going through that are having a very difficult time. What would you say, to that sort of group of pastors and leaders to encourage them?
Well, in our situation, I could say, not every succession is successful. And one of the things why ours, I believe, has been successful, the time has proven that, is that my dad, for one, didn't feel like my success was a loss of his legacy. He saw me as his legacy, meaning he saw the successes I was having as his successes because he poured into me as as my father. So he wasn't challenged by that. So whenever we took on a new plan, it didn't feel like he was being erased when an old system was being erased. And the other thing is he's got a servant's heart. He is somebody who's a very humble guy, and he's a sacrificial minister, meaning he's always been somebody who's championed other people's success. That's not always the case, because a lot of people will hold off on succession for a couple reasons. Like most people will hold off for maybe financial reasons, like maybe they're still pastoring past their past the time when they should be there because maybe they didn't plan. They never planned financially for the time when they wouldn't be making a salary. They didn't plan that way. So maybe it's financial reasons. And the other one is legacy. Did they feel like they hit that place they felt they should hit? Did everything they were running with in their heart come through?
Interesting.
I'm believing that when the time comes that I'm handing my church off to somebody or our church off, that there will be things left undone that I had in my heart. But I should be able to pray that in the future, someone else re-envisions those things and carries that so that the essence of it still lives.
Totally. Yeah.
And so he championed us. He wasn't, we were his success.
That's really cool. Yeah. That's something. With, I find that a lot of pastors can sometimes be just in the craziness with, church, life, family, it can be isolated unintentionally.
Yeah.
What advice would you give to pastors and leaders to focus on building and staying in community amidst all the craziness and just life stuff that happens?
Yeah. Well, we have a unique story there as well. We were very isolated, not by necessarily choice, but by geography even, because we live on Vancouver Island. So even to come, like a lot of things, conferences that we love in Canada are in Alberta. So you're always getting on a plane, you're always traveling.
Right.
But on top of that, it's a different cultural climate on the island.
Definitely, yeah.
So finding churches that are, ministers that are carrying what you're doing in ministry, like outside of your town, is so important because, you want to get around vision-driven, leader-led type churches and vision-driven leaders so that it rubs off on you. Now, Lindsay and I were in a season of our life where we were very lonely in ministry. There's also that you need to have friends. They don't need to be in ministry. They can just be your friends. And we're always trying to say, how can we grow in that? But one of the places that we were really lacking was friends in ministry. Like we belong to different groups over time, but it's almost mechanical. It's not, and we also maybe belonged in places where we didn't sense the same kind of vision in our hearts. And it was actually in COVID that some really great people in our life, that Pastor Heather and Pastor Mel Mullen, from Home Church. Many would know Pastor Jake and Becca. They were out visiting, and long story short, it's a kind of how the Lord sets things up, that when you have a desire to partner with him and what he has a purpose for your life, he'll bring the right people into your world.
Yeah.
And so we went for coffee with them because during COVID, they couldn't travel. And I remember we went for coffee. Then they came back on the island and they said, let's go for lunch. So we went for lunch, and at one of the times we got together for lunch, Pastor Heather leaned over to us and just said, who do you have for friends? And we just said, really, we don't have a lot of ministry friendships. She says, well, you're going to have to, go build them. And she just kind of looked at us and said, no, maybe you're just going to have to make a list of people you want to know. Now within that, and then reach out to those people. You have to be a friend to have friends.
Yeah.
And so for us, we were in a season of building on the relationships, some that we had. Like Pastor Brett, I've known him for 25 years.
Oh, wow.
So we've been close. So the Lord brought some people back together. The Mullen family, I knew Pastor Heather's parents growing up. They had a cabin at the camp I was at.
Cool.
And so I grew up knowing her parents. So I knew those folks. And then we went to ARC. The first year ARC was in Vancouver, the ARC conference for Canada, and met some people. And great people like Justin Reimer invited us in, said, come on over, you got to be in the room. And so we awkwardly kind of went to this thing, and then we went to another one, and we realized not only do we know people in those places, but we made lots of really neat new friends. But what we're learning is sometimes it's just, there's no substitute. Sorry, not sometimes. There's never a substitute for time. So when we come to Pastors Gathering in 2021, it's good. It might be a little bit, it's good. There's some good takeaways. Come back in 2022, it becomes more natural. Now you know people in the room. You're not getting to meet people in the room, because I'm actually kind of an introvert, so actually meeting people is a challenge.
Really?
Oh yeah.
I would not at all strike you as that.
So it's like I have to work myself up to go do these things. Yeah, Lindsay and I are both like that. We can decompress after a busy weekend and not even talk to each other for 24 hours. Like we're just like totally coming down.
Jeez.
But we would go to these things and we would lean into relationship, and then the third time you come, now you're seeing each other, you're hugging, and you know each other, because it takes time. And if I have one encouragement for somebody out there that feels lonely right now, don't quit too soon. Just be yourself and be in the room and be a part of something together, pull together and receive together, pray together, worship together. I think pastors' conferences are kind of like summer camp was as a kid. You know, that kid that you knew that was in your cabin every summer. Pastors go, it's like going to camp together, you know.
That's a good way of putting it.
So
what, we just came, Tom Lane was talking about the 6 different seasons and stuff.
Yeah.
As a church, but then also personally as a pastor, what seasons would you guys say you're in right now?
A war.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're fighting for ground, taking ground. When there's a constant, in order to take something from somewhere to somewhere else, you're going to encounter challenges. Mm-hmm. And so I would say that we're battling. Yeah.
In the season that you're in right now, a bit of a personal question, but what's your greatest fear?
That's a good question. I might have to come back to it because I take those questions very seriously. As far as the greast fear, good question.
And we can circle back.
We'll have to circle back. Let me think about it.
And the reason I ask is just because I find a lot of.
Well, maybe I'll qualify it this way.
Sure.
I think that sometimes I'm kind of coming to the point as I get older, and I was afraid to get older, and now I'm happy. I'm happy where I'm at. Like there's things that I know now, and in my heart that I used to know in my head. But I'm kind of thinking we overcomplicate those questions a little bit or we try to get a little. I think there's kind of 2 emotions I live in. Okay. I either live in faith or fear. But fear can masquerade as a lot of different things. Like fear can be control, right? So if I'm trying to micromanage something, is it micromanaging it because I have so much great faith, or is it micromanaging because I'm afraid of something?
Interesting. Good point.
Fear can look like workaholism. Fear can look like busy work. Fear can look like being non-committal. So for me, what my biggest fear is that maybe it's not maybe a biggest fear, but maybe it's learning to identify when something like an issue I'm facing emotionally is being driven by a belief a root belief that's coming out in my life, like if I become a control freak. So something I will do sometimes is if my day hasn't felt productive, I'll nose into something, whether it's my kid's homework or whether it's my wife's day or whatever. I'll say like, hey, how's it going? Oh, I could help you with that. And I'm like, oh, just let me stop from it. And I'm like literally procrastinating from my work to take control of someone else's job and step in and mess up what they're doing. But that control freak mentality, that control mechanism is actually being driven by fear and not faith. And so for me, there's this concept I'm working through right now is, am I waking up in anticipating that today's the day of a breakthrough in a certain area, or am I waking up thinking that I'm just going to have to face this forever? Fatalism can look like fear. I don't know. I just think I want to make sure that I'm living from the side of faith, and not totally. Not to super spiritualize it, just to say, hey, identify this stuff that's going on in my life as maybe a root issue with, do I believe God can really do this? And do I really believe God's called me to this? Totally. Do I really believe God's going to equip me or empower me or anoint me to do this? So
that's so good.
Yeah.
No, thanks. And I appreciate you sharing and being transparent. Thank you for that. Sort of leading to the last question.
Sure.
Which is the question that I've been asking everyone, and on other podcasts I ask everybody.
Yeah, my favorite hockey team is the Oilers.
Yeah. Just so you know. That's not the question, but it's good to say that.
I was trying to guess.
Because you've been in leadership for how many years now?
Long time.
Yeah. So over that time, what's the worst piece of advice you've ever received?
Ooh, I had leadership guys who were big on church leadership tell me that I should stop leading worship in my church, because if you're going to be the pastor, it's overkill if you are also leading worship. And I still want to have great worship leaders in our church. But I believe that in my case, my role as senior leader of the church is that I'm the lead worship leader. I'm the lead worshiper. And so there was a season where I thought I was wrecking our church by still leading a song or injecting myself in the worship or those things. And I believed that lie for a little while. Now I'm rarely, it's been weeks since I've even been involved in our worship teams. But when I started, I used to lead worship and preach everywhere I traveled. The whole thing was on my heart. And it was one of our students. It's actually my nephew. He's 16. He was saying what he appreciated most about me one day. and he doesn't say a lot. He's into basketball. That's his thing.
Yeah.
He said, I love about you that you still lead worship, even though you've got the duties of senior pastor.
Jeez. That's cool.
And I was like, yeah. So it's changed, of course. I'd like to do it when I want to do it.
Right, sure,
I don't want to, but I think that was some advice somebody told me, that you better get off the equipment and get off the worship. And I actually think I believed that for a while. And that's probably not the worst advice I've received in leadership, but that's the one that comes to mind.
Yeah, fair enough. Sweet. Well, Brian, thanks so much. I appreciate you taking the time
I
to
hope
do
it
this.
helps.
It definitely does.
Yep, thanks for doing this.
Pastor Gathering 2024. Be great. Stay blessed. Adios.